So in this video, we're going to be talking about how the Augustan Principate comes to a spectacular end, but a new and adapted Principate rises from the ashes. So Nero, what is the Augustan Principate? The Augustan Principate is faith and trust in an individual. It is the core of Marian populism. It is the role that is played by an individual that is able to command the faith of the Roman populace, the legions, and the nobility. And this is the way in which Nero is incompetent. Nero is unable to command and retain the faith and trust of the masses, of the legions, and of the nobility, and so they don't aren't able to cleave to him. They aren't able to retain the support that is required for him to exercise this responsibility. And there's an extent to which the men that he relies upon to administer this vast apparatus, which is the Roman Empire, the nobility in Rome and the military commanders in the provinces see him as inferior to all that have come before him, and realize that it is possible for someone else to fulfill that role. And some of them are saying, I could do this better. Others are saying, this man that I do have faith and trust in, my neighboring governor or whoever, that person can do it better. But the core problem is that Nero fails. Nero is incompetent in retaining that faith and trust. And so the result of this is that there are a series of uprisings that reflect that failure. And this is what leads to this catastrophic breakdown of the Principate that begins in 68 and leads to this year of four emperors, the year 69, in which we have this revolving door. So this begins with there's a series of rebellions. One of the most significant elements of this is actually just before Galba. We have the decision by the governor of Gallia Lugdunensis, which is northern Gaul. Gaul is in three parts. So this is northern Gaul, the northernmost end of what is now France. Windex is, turns against Nero, makes the fatal decision that says someone else needs to do this better. The Roman Empire needs somebody that everybody can believe in, and he declares his support for Galba, the governor of nearer Spain, to replace Nero. And so this leads to a conflict with other neighboring governors who are not supporting Nero, but who are supporting other candidates. Windex ends up fighting a battle and is defeated and commits suicide. But Galba is set on the road to being the first and most significant alternative to Nero, and people are seeking an alternative to Nero. Nero doesn't, particularly take to this job. He doesn't particularly want it. He likes the position of power. He likes the opportunities that it affords him to indulge in doing whatever he wants to do, which is how his personality was shaped. But he doesn't take to the administration. He has no conception of the military aspect or the governance of the provinces. Everybody's looking for an alternative to Nero, and so Galba, who is an able governor, seems like a viable alternative to this, but. And so Galba has the support of Otto, who is his neighboring governor in Lusitania, what is further Spain, or what is now Portugal and western Spain. Galba is the governor of nearer Spain, the eastern part of what is now Spain. So Galba comes to Rome and seizes power with Otto's support, but the nobility in Rome is hostile, and in order to placate the nobility, Galba Galba names as his adoptive heir somebody who's a member of the senatorial class, and that alienates Otto. So Otto engineers a rebellion against Galba. So Galba is princeps for 7 months until Otto turns on him, and so Otto is princeps for 3 months. But in the meantime, the legions in Germania have been hostile to Galba this whole time, and have declared that that their commander, Vitellius, the governor of Upper Germany, is much more qualified, is more likely to be able to do nice things for the legions. Of course, there's self-interest involved in all of this, and so the forces of Vitellius march on Rome. In their turn, and Vitellius takes Rome and proclaims himself princeps, and so he's princeps for 8 months. And in the meantime, Vitellius, because he is a representative of a faction, alienates those who believe that someone who is seizing power for his own sake, somebody who's seizing power because he wants to be powerful, isn't the right person to be the Augustus, doesn't fulfill that role. And so there are other people that are searching for a governor, commander who actually represents the nobility of Augustus. And consensus quickly centers around Vespasian, who is, at this point, he had been a consul, he had been governor in Africa. He is now the commander of the forces in Judea, because Rome is engaged in a war against the Jews at this point. And so consensus quickly evolved: who is actually the most worthy out of all the governors, the most capable, the strongest, is the strongest mind, and the strongest fiber, and the most experienced. That's actually not Vitellius. Nobody believes it's Vitellius. Everybody knows it's Vespasian. So Vespasian gains the support of the legions one by one, and the governors in the east that have worked with him. The governor of Syria supports him, and the legions of the east, and increasingly legions around the Mediterranean, declare their support for Vespasian, and they march on Rome on his behalf, which causes Vitellius to try to come to a deal. But the end result is that Vespasian comes to power in the same way, in a sense that it is the result of the legions. And this is the beginning of the period in which the legions are making their commanders, their generals, into emperors by declaring their support for their commander, and proclaiming him to be emperor. This is that terrible turning point. And yet all of this goes back deep into the Republic. The sense of identity in the legion, where the legion loses its sense of being, identified with the city of Rome, and the identity within a legion becomes focused on the legion itself, all their comrades, and focused on the eagle, as a central semi-religious visual focus of identity, and on the commander. That sense that goes back a couple of centuries, predates Marius. Marius gives us the eagle, but the sense of isolation and separate identity of the legion goes back even further than this. Now we're in a situation where the leadership of Rome is centered, or is now officially fostered by faith and trust in a great man. Naturally, that's going to draw the attention of the legions to their commanders. What this is signifying also is the role that the legions are playing in stabilizing and being part of the provinces. The legions are positioned in the provinces, and they are a focal point of Roman identity. They play a big role not only in protecting the legions, the provinces from exterior forces, but in ensuring stability and protecting trade and so forth. They are the most dramatic Roman presence in a lot of ways, especially away from the central Municipia and Colonia, the Roman administrative and commercial and cultural centers. The Roman legion, has a great deal to do with, the Romanitas of the entire empire, and so the power focus that the legions have throughout the provinces is one of the things that affects how the empire is run, and it comes to the surface of bringing about the change in emperors at this point. The the choice of who is to be emperor, who is to be princeps, is now partly determined by who the legions will accept. But again, this has always been true. Marius comes to power because he is the hero of the legions and the masses. Julius Caesar comes to power because he is the hero of the legions and the masses. The central populist role is the people believe most of all in somebody who is an effective warrior, and the same is true of the legions. And so this leads us to the downfall of Nero, and it leads us to the succession of provincial governors, but it leads us to Vespasian. Now, Tacitus describes this as the secret of the empire, that it is now divulged in 68-69, that the secret of empire, that emperors could be made elsewhere than at Rome. And, in a sense, what this is talking about is, coming to power in Rome can be accomplished by military force, by a commander with legions at his back. But again, this is nothing new. This is certainly not a secret, because this is how Julius Caesar comes to power. This is how Sulla came to power before this. The march on Rome, the use of a warlord with a legion at his back, taking Rome and making himself the power there, goes back to Sulla, and in fact Sulla is replacing, Sulla marches on Rome, but then he goes off to Mithridates, and it's Marius that marches on Rome again and takes power there. Sulla has to come back from the east to march on Rome and take power from Marius. That precedent is there. It is the legacy of Marius and Sulla, and so it was only a matter of time before, once the succession to Augustus was no longer in the hands of the Julio-Claudians. Once it became clear that the imperial family of the Julio-Claudians was not enough of a pool of fertile, men of caliber to provide, reliable, atlases for the Roman world, then it becomes open to, the people that have a legion at their back that can come to Rome and take power for themselves, as Marius had, as Sulla had, as Julius Caesar had. And so this is a situation that is transformative for the nature of the Principate, but not for Rome itself. Vespasian is an innovation in a number of ways. He is the first equestrian princeps, and essentially what this means is, there's two orders of nobility. One order in which the chief men of the family belong to the senatorial order and are either in the Senate or are sons of people in the Senate, and the equestrians is all the rest of the noble families, patrician and plebeian. The equestrian order is sort of the second rank of the Roman elite. And so for Vespasian to be the first equestrian emperor, this is significant. The fact that Vespasian is acclaimed emperor rather than being made emperor by succession, by adoption, is significant. The fact that he is acclaimed emperor rather than the Principate being a gift to the Senate is immensely significant, because this is the transition point from the power being gifted to the ruler of Rome by the Senate, as a means of the Senate ensuring its own the necessity, the means of the Senate shoring up its own role in things by being the dispenser of powers and privileges. Once again, this goes back to Julius Caesar. The dictatorship was given to Caesar in order for the Senate to ensure its own role. Likewise, the first settlement, the second settlement, all the way through the Julio-Claudians, it happens the Senate is the same way. Even Claudius, who the Senate has the situation forced on them, this is still the Senate dispensing this authority. Vespasian is acclaimed emperor, and this is a shift, making the Senate more subordinate to the other factors, the wider nobility. So the Senate is not equal to the nobility. The Senate is just a subset of the nobility. The wider nobility is in a position of ascendance in comparison to the Senate, as well as the legions and the masses, all of them needing to accept Vespasian. So the proclamation of Vespasian, we have this discussion of this in Tacitus that talks about how the legions in turn embrace Vespasian as being the ideal princeps. What's really striking here is this legal text, because the chaos of the previous couple of years was immensely damaging, and there's a vital need to ensure not just stability, but a sense of durability, to restore a sense that the leadership of Rome is durable and sustainable. And so the law that Vespasian passes is for the first time a constitutional description of what it means to be the Augustus. The Augustus is still the princeps is still the passing on of this name Augustus, and what it means to be the Augustus. This is very, very striking. What this law says is to be the Augustus is to act in the way that Augustus had. And there are a number of places in which it describes, this should be like the actions of Augustus and the actions of Claudius. The other name that's mentioned here is Claudius, because Claudius had deliberately set out to emulate the sense of responsibility and even-handedness that Augustus had established. And so this is a law that says, what is it to be the Augustus? What are the responsibilities? What is the burden of being the Augustus? And it doesn't lay out a list. It doesn't lay out this huge description saying you have to do this, you have to do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. It says to be the Augustus is to act as Augustus did. The other thing that Vespasian does here is, by coming to Rome and reestablishing authority and shifting the nature of the Principate so that it is now defined in this way, so that there's now this condition that is not simply random men holding an estate which happens to be the Roman Empire, but there's this actual defined condition, the Principate. The Principate is newly shaped under Vespasian, and to signify this, he is also responsible for creating a succession of rulers after himself. The interesting thing here is that the nature of succession in the Roman Empire has been about choosing somebody from your extended family, and if not from your extended family, then from the nobility, who is worthy, who has merit, who has experience, who has the capacity to engineer that faith and trust. Vespasian has two sons who he makes his direct successors, and this is an interesting experiment in a way. What the principle often shows is that it is an alternative to normal dynastic monarchy in which people automatically succeed. With Vespasian, we have succession that is in relation to the merits of those involved. In particular, Titus has been fighting alongside Vespasian, has been a partner, a junior partner in all of his military and administrative activities in Judea and so forth. Titus is takes over for Vespasian in the Judean War, and has generally demonstrated, has been given a great deal of responsibility by Vespasian, and has shown his capability. And so, even though Titus is his biological son, he is the natural person to be the heir of Vespasian. And he is immensely popular. He's vindicated in the records. He's a warrior. He is widely praised for his public works. He builds a lot of infrastructure, and he responds generously and actively to the two big disasters that happened during his very brief 2-year reign, which is there's a big fire in Rome in the year 80, and also the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79. He builds the Colosseum, which gives him lasting fame as the person who engineers this, and he often gives a great deal of the credit to his father Vespasian, who he deifies, uh, which is a positive thing in this sense that people are looking for the Principate to be stable and occupied by great men. And so the deification of Vespasian is felt to be justified, as it's felt to be a return to what the Principate was capable of under Augustus. And Titus also expands the idea of the imperial cult, not amongst Romans, but as a means of ensuring the Romanification of peoples that are subject to the Romans. Subject peoples are given the opportunity to worship the Roman emperor, and not necessarily a particular Roman emperor, not the actual current occupant. This is a general sense of the Augustus being the person who watches out for people in this world and then becomes there's an apotheosis and it rises to the heavens and continues to watch out for the Roman people. This is something that gains traction under Titus and Domitian, and actually is a factor in sort of smoothing out the Romanification of the outer provinces. What historians tend to mostly associate Titus with is not his administrative triumphs, but the Jewish War, partly because Titus and Vespasian fight the Jewish War together when the Jews rebel in 66 and seek to achieve independence for themselves. Nero sends Vespasian to put them down and reassert Roman authority. Vespasian and Titus then push the Jews back. They take Galilee and force the rebels back toward Jerusalem. Then Vespasian has to go to Rome, and Titus takes on the rest of the war. And it's and so the most we associate the war most with Titus for three reasons. One is the most dramatic and terrible events of this war happen after Vespasian leaves, and Titus is in charge. In particular, the siege of Jerusalem, in which the second temple is destroyed in order to destroy the separate Jewish identity, and Masada, which happens after that, in which the Jews fight to death as a people. Um, Second, we have the triumphal arch, which Titus builds when he comes back and has a triumph, and this commemorates all the aspects of the Jewish campaign, and we see the items that are looted from the Second Temple. And the third aspect of this is there's a history that is written of these Jewish wars by Josephus, which is a very in-depth and dramatic account of the Romano-Jewish wars from the standpoint of a Jew who is also a Roman. And so the Jewish war is harsh and horrific. From the Roman perspective, the problem is that most of the world, everybody but the Jews, and the very small cult of Christians, which are just starting out. We'll talk more about the Christians later. But right now, the Christians are not a force. The Jews are a phenomenal presence in Judea. So the situation with the Jews is the ancient world is pagan, and pagan religion tends to create a local identity that in situations like the Roman Empire, which is strong and beneficial and protective, that identity can be assimilated more or less into a larger identity, such as Romanness. This has worked also for the Persian Empire previously. But monotheism creates a very singular bond in which the individual gains the protection of direct protection of a god in exchange for loyalty and worship. And so monotheistic religions have a much stronger identity and are much more resistant to assimilation. And so the Jews are culturally a much greater threat to the Romans than a lot of other kinds of peoples, than pagan peoples in general. And so when the Jews rise up, it is a singular kind of threat that must be ended for the sake of the Roman Empire. And so the Roman war against the Jews is fierce and total, because they don't just need to take their cities and defeat their armies. They need to damage the Jewish identity as much as they can, in order to reduce or eliminate, preferably eliminate, the threat that it poses to Romanness in that part of the world. And this is what Vespasian and Titus attempt to accomplish, and this is why the Jerusalem is sieged and sacked, and why the temple is destroyed in particular. Of course, this doesn't destroy the Jewish identity. It merely disperses it and creates the animosity that becomes a future focus. But the Jewish war is a short-term success for the Romans, and the fact that the Titus's arch shows the symbols of the Jewish identity being paraded through Rome in Titus's triumph is very immensely representative of this. And so we have this account from Josephus, which is this immensely engrossing read that talks about, Josephus knows what it is to be a Roman and knows what it is to be a Jew, and he talks about the agony that the Jews experience in fighting for this sense of identity against an implacable enemy that seeks to destroy it. Josephus also talks about in great detail what the nature of the Roman army is like during this time, and so it's an invaluable source not only for the perspective of the Jews, but also for how the Romans are seen, and the immense sense of frightening sense of order that they impose in their camps and their formations, and how they become something other than men when it comes to waging war in the Roman way. Titus only reigns for 2 years, and he's succeeded by his brother Domitian. Domitian is not as much of a success, but so Domitian is here's the thing. Domitian is a very able administrator. Under his regime, the Roman Empire experiences economic growth and very successful fiscal management. The frontiers are stable, and things are functioning well. Domitian gets on with the people, which is we have stories like this in which Domitian is trying to sort of gain favor with everybody. This is written from the standpoint of a writer who doesn't like Domitian, and in general, our problem with Domitian is not so much what it is that he does, but what Roman historians say about him. By the time we have our chief sources for this era, Tacitus and Suetonius, from sort of the next generation, writing under Hadrian and so forth, it has become fashionable to turn against Domitian. And why is that? Because Domitian was a friend to the people in the legions, but he didn't get on with the nobility. The nobility rubbed him the wrong way. He didn't have his father's ability or Augustus's ability to schmooze amongst the elite. He finds them off-putting, and so he doesn't act in a way that reassures the nobility that he is taking care of them. And so, in this way, given that the job of the princeps is to protect his three constituencies, the people, the legions, and the nobility, and to ensure that he has their faith and trust, in this way, Domitian is not a good emperor. And so, even though our histories about him are hostile, they have a point. So, the result is that the Domitian becomes a counterexample to Titus for the role of biological succession. In other words, Titus deserved to become princeps because he was immensely able and he was the right man for the job. Domitian becomes princeps by blood, despite being not up to the same standards. And we're going to see this acted out in greater extreme from this point onward. It's a general rule that those that are adoptive heirs that are chosen by merits tend to end up being strong and well-liked princeps, and those who succeed biologically because they're the biological son of the previous emperor end up being disasters. And we'll see this play out as we continue the story. And for now, that's that.